Hi, it's Sheila from To Love, Honor, and Vacuum, and we're here for another edition of Ask Sheila, where I answer some reader questions. And today is actually, this is a hard day for me. So I am filming this first thing in the morning on August 6th, and it'll go up on the blog in about an hour or so. But today is actually my son's 22nd birthday, or at least it would be my son's 22nd birthday, but he died when he was a month old back in 1996. And so this is always a bit of a hard day for me, and we actually have a question about grief and intimacy, and I thought this was a good day to answer it because on August 6th every year I like to do some sort of a post that has to do with Christopher, just so that I can honor him. So I want to talk about grief today. So here is our question. For some reason, although I've been reading your blog for some time, I only discovered the post about the loss of your son today. Our second daughter died in September of a couple of years ago when she was 36 days old, and our eldest daughter was 19 months. So that's almost exactly the same. It's like as us, it's the same timing. Like Rebecca was 19 months old when our son Christopher died when he was 29 days old. So it's almost exactly the same. And it's almost same date of death as well. So a lot of similarities here. 2 years later, her brother was stillborn. And then after having a healthy child a little after that, she miscarried again before going on to have her youngest. And it's true that grief comes in waves, and it's also true, as one of your commenters mentioned, that grief can be like a hole in the floor that you consciously avoid. Yeah, that was a great comment that someone left on my grief post about how it's as if there's a hole in the floor and you've put a rug over it, and then you go out of your way to step around that hole, but you know it's there, but you're just trying desperately to avoid it all the time, and I know exactly what that feels like. For me, grief is a part of the problem that I've developed over time with sex. There are reasons that make those issues related in my mind that would not apply to others, but I was wondering if you've written on how grief can affect intimacy. Oh goodness, I don't even know where to start. If anyone's read my book, The Good Girl's Guide to Great Sex, I actually share a really personal story in there that I also share when I give my girl talk about how the night that Christopher died, we got called to the hospital at 1:30 in the morning when he was crashing. And when we got there, they were still working on him. And then 15 minutes later, they brought his body out to Keith and me. And, you know, we got to hold him probably for we spent about half an hour with him afterwards. And, you know, I sang to him and we prayed over him and we cried a lot. And then the nurse came in to take him back. And I kissed him on the forehead and I said, "Goodbye, Christopher, Mommy loves you and I will see you again one day." And then she took him away, and it's the weirdest feeling knowing that you're never going to see your son on this side of heaven again and letting her walk off with him. And then she came back in with a little clip of his hair. And I'm sorry, I thought I could get through this. And some handprints and footprints that she'd taken for us to have. And we walked back home, and it was 3 in the morning by the time we got back home. And we had called the people that we needed to call. But it was way too early to do the mass calling. And, you know, you couldn't really start preparing for the funeral yet. And we were just hurting so very much. And that night we turned to each other really out of desperation. It was like I had this huge hole in my chest and I just needed Keith to fill it. And he had that same gaping wound. And it was actually a really healing experience. It had nothing to do with, you know, being aroused or all the stuff we normally talk about with sex. It was just this desperation to be intimate. And I think that was the first time that I really understood what it meant that, you know, sex isn't just physical. Like I really got that in that moment, that it's also emotionally and spiritually intimate too, and you really do feel like you're one. However, you know, that was 22 years ago. And as the grief gets less intense, you know, there's still periods where it pops up and it comes on you in waves. And I think a lot of the way we handle grief really depends on our personality. It's funny, we're doing a personality month on To Live, Honor, and Vacuum this month every Wednesday. And my personality, Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTJ, which means that I'm really more of I focus more on logic and on reasoning than I do on feelings. I tend to talk about things when I want to process what I'm thinking. But the other side of that personality is that my feeling side is very introverted. So it doesn't mean that I don't have feelings. It's just that when I do have feelings, I react almost, it's like my shadow side. It means that I go opposite to how I normally react, and I put this wall around myself. And so when I'm sad, I need to be by myself. I can't talk about it. I can talk about my thoughts, like, till the cows come home. But I find it really difficult when I'm feeling something very intensely, like grief. I find that very difficult to let other people in. And because grief comes in waves, there's periodic times where I get like that again. Now, my husband, on the other hand, is an extroverted feeler. So when he has feelings, he can talk about them, and he can be right there with them, and he wants me to enter in. And I find that very difficult because when I'm feeling good, I don't want to enter into his grief. And when I'm feeling badly, I need to be by myself. And so grief is something that it can be very difficult to experience with your spouse if you handle it in a different way. And so the problem is that grief can tend to push you apart because you think that because the other person isn't expressing grief the way you do, that they're not feeling it properly. So either they're not feeling it intensely enough, or they can't get over it, or whatever it might be. It's debilitating for them or whatever. And we need to fight against that. So, you know, she's saying that sex is something which causes them to go apart. And, you know, that's a lot. That's a lot of grief. That's one little girl dying, and then a stillborn, and then a miscarriage. And even though they have, it looks like they have 3 healthy children, and they've lost 3. And we have 2 healthy children, and we've lost 2. I also had a miscarriage. And that's hard. You know, it is really hard, and especially because her kids are still relatively young. So you're dealing with all of this grief at the same time as you have little ones. And it's really easy to grow apart from each other. And so my challenge, I think, is to understand that part of healing with grief isn't necessarily talking about it for some people. It is for some people, but for others it isn't. But it is getting that connection. Okay, so when we have that really intimate connection with someone, it can actually help our healing process. That's part of the miracle of making love, because there's a real intimacy that comes, and you can actually share grief when you are making love in a way that you can't when you're just talking about it, because you're sharing the most intimate parts with each other. And when you are able to get like that, like when you in the middle of your grief are actually able to start, you know, holding each other and kissing each other and whatever else may come, it's almost like a healing balm that you put over your heart, because you've allowed those feelings to come to the surface, but then you've allowed someone in a way. When you can let someone in those most difficult times, it can be very healing. And so my challenge to you would be, don't take your grief and be isolated in it. I know that is my tendency, and it doesn't always serve me very well. You know, take that grief and actually share it. And if you're having trouble sharing, because I have trouble talking about it sometimes, just say one sentence. Just say one sentence and then just hold each other. And that can really help to get over some of that. I also think it's important for us to realize how much we carry grief in our physical bodies, especially when grief is related to miscarriage and birth. I've been working on this new fitness plan, Fit to Be. .us, and I've been doing it because I have, well, okay, this is my natural posture. All right, this is very bad. And they've been teaching me how to do, like, how to align my core, and it's been very good, and how to sit properly, how to get out of chairs properly, all these different things. I'm still working on the aligning. I haven't got to the exercise part yet, but it's very good. But they do have a video in there, and they have some resources in there on how you can actually start to release some of the grief that you're carrying in your body. And that may be good to start thinking about too, because a lot of us carry our grief when it comes to miscarriages actually in our physical bodies, and learning how to get that out can really help you too. And sex can be a wonderful tool for that. So I think I just want to say, You know, 22 years on, you can tell I really didn't think that I was going to today, but I can still get teary. This isn't something that you just get over. You still remember these things, okay? But in that, I would just challenge you, don't isolate yourself. You don't always have to share everything. You don't have to walk the journey of grief completely together. It's okay if you handle grief differently, but don't turn away from the healing power that making love can bring to that. And sometimes when you are feeling badly, just don't ask your spouse to necessarily talk to you about it or be there through it, because they may not process grief the same way. But if you can say one sentence aloud and then just hold each other and then see where it leads, sex can actually be a very healing thing because you're able to be intimate with each other. So I hope that helps. It is a long journey. Give yourself a lot of grace in it. And yes, grief does come in waves, but don't always try to avoid that hole in the rug that you've thrown, or that hole in the floor that you've thrown the rug over. Because sometimes we need to see it. And it's much easier to see it if you're holding someone at the same time.